Season 2 of House of the Dragon missed so many great opportunities from the books. Everything from a giant wild dragon attack, to Jace marrying a member of House Stark, to the introduction of a badass female archer who would go on to shape the structure of the realm following the war. Even George R.R. Martin has criticized the season. In this video, I will detail a handful of these missed opportunities. As always, thanks for watching. It really means a lot to me. Firstly, it is important to understand that Fire and Blood, the book that House of the Dragon is based on, is written as an in-world history book, with multiple sources providing differing accounts of the same events. And being a history book, there is little in the way of characterization. However, the accounts presented in the book can provide a solid foundation for the TV show to build upon, which could have led to the exploration of some interesting themes, which in turn would have incited some unique character growth. Unfortunately, I found Season 2 lacking in this regard. Some of the biggest missed opportunities come from Jace's storyline in Winterfell, where we could have seen some fantastic character development that would have transformed him from a young princeling unsure of his place in the world into a self-assured man worthy to lead and inherit the Iron Throne. Accompanying this character growth, we could have also seen some amazing book lore that expands the world, further enriching the story. In both the book and the show, Jace arrives on his dragon Vermax to treat with Cregan Stark, hoping to win the Northerners to Rhaenyra's cause. In the show, Jace doesn't really have any good role models in his life. His real father, Harwin Strong, had to stay at arm's length. Laenor faked his death and bailed, and Daemon is straight up a terrible influence, which has really left Jace lacking a reliable male role model to help guide him through the emotional turmoil of losing his younger brother, but also to teach him how a just ruler should approach difficult situations and decisions. His character seemed primed and ready for a strong role model to influence him, which left the perfect opportunity for Cregan to enter the story and fulfill that role. In the books, Cregan experiences his own mini Stark civil war. When Cregan was 13, his father died, so his uncle, Bernard Stark, reigned as regent until Cregan came of age. However, when Cregan was ready to claim his birthright, his uncle refused to give up full control of the North, prompting Cregan to rise up against his uncle. Eventually, Cregan imprisoned his uncle and his 3 cousins, taking uncontested rule of the North. This event forged Cregan into an unyielding, uncompromising man, and from this experience, Cregan could have provided Jace some unique insight and counsel on how Jace should approach the civil war that the young princeling now faces. Perhaps Cregan could have taught Jace that decisive action is required to secure the realm. This lesson would have propelled Jace's agency within the story, driving him to take more drastic actions to win the war, just like his book counterpart does in Fire and Blood. As well as providing advice regarding the civil war, Cregan could have also given Jace emotional support regarding the recent death of his younger brother Lucerys. In the books, upon meeting Cregan, the pair really hit it off. They go hunting together, train together, and formed a bond of brotherhood sworn in blood. But there is also depth to this friendship. Both Cregan and Jace have lost a younger brother. Cregan's brother died some 10 years earlier, while Jace's brother Luke died at the hands of Aemond and Vhagar recently. This shared loss could have been a great foundation to forge their relationship on the show, with each of them seeing their lost brother in the other. Perhaps Cregan could have helped Jace come to terms with his brother's death and grow in the process. However, there could have been a level of drama to their relationship. In the books, this brotherhood was almost undone when Jace meets Sarah Snow, Cregan's bastard sister. According to one account in Fire and Blood, Jace fell deeply for Sarah, and in a secret ceremony in Winterfell's Godswood, the pair spoke vows of marriage as the old gods looked on. To seal their union, they shared a bed and clapped cheeks. But when Cregan learned that his guest had claimed the maidenhead of his bastard sister, he became outraged. Only when Sarah Snow told Lord Cregan that Jace and her had been married did Cregan soften his stance. This event could have been so layered on the show. Officially, Jace is the true-born son of Rhaenyra and Laenor, but in reality, he is the bastard of Harwin Strong. Like Jon Snow, the fact that Jace is a bastard weighs heavily upon every action he takes and how he presents himself. Perhaps, like Jon, Jace does not want to sleep with a woman and risk bringing a bastard son into the world, who would suffer the scorn and hatred by the circumstances of their birth. Jace's moral code prevents him from laying with Sarah without first committing vows of marriage. This line of thinking would mirror book Robb Stark as well, who after sleeping with Jane Westerling is conflicted with bringing a bastard into the world. He knows the trauma that Jon has experienced as a bastard and wants to avoid imparting that onto his own child. So instead, Robb opts to marry Jane despite being already betrothed to a daughter of House Frey. Unfortunately, Robb's honourable intent would directly lead to the events of the Red Wedding. In both the books and the show, at this point in the timeline, Jace is betrothed to Baelor Targaryen. This obligation would have added another layer of complexity to the situation that Jace would have needed to consider in his decision to marry Sarah. Does he give in to his desire and pursue love, or does he set aside his personal desires and maintain the political marriage? This arc could have perfectly exemplified George R.R. Martin's writing ethos, which is the idea that the only thing worth writing about is the heart in conflict with itself. What could be more conflicting than Jace having to choose between his love for Sarah and his duty to Baelor and the realm? Is love the death of duty? In Fire and Blood, to further aid in the union between House Targaryen and House Stark, Jace and Cregan negotiate an agreement known as the Pact of Ice and Fire. Under the terms of the pact, Jace's firstborn daughter was to marry Cregan's son and heir, which is interesting in its own right. If Rhaenyra's claim is successful, Jace will become ruler after her, but if Jace's firstborn child is a girl, it can be assumed that she would be his heir, in keeping with Team Black's belief that a firstborn daughter can inherit, just as Rhaenyra inherited her father's throne. This could potentially lead to Cregan's son marrying the Queen of the Seven Kingdoms, making the son king consort, and their children, Cregan's grandchildren, would sit the Iron Throne, meaning in just a generation or two, House Stark would essentially sit the Iron Throne alongside House Targaryen. Unfortunately, this union between Stark and Targaryen would never come to pass, but the pact would finally be fulfilled generations later between Rhaegar and Lyanna. The inclusion of the Pact of Ice and Fire could have been a more subtle way to link House of the Dragon and the main series, rather than inserting a vision of White Walkers like they did with Daemon's storyline. Before departing Winterfell, it was also rumored that Jace's dragon Vermax laid a clutch of eggs below Winterfell. Winterfell was built on a natural hot springs, which created a warm environment perfect for dragon hatchlings. While this is a throwaway line in Fire and Blood, it just adds to the mystery of what lies below Winterfell, specifically in the crypts. I never would have expected them to adapt this, but just thought it was an interesting line from the books to include in this video. In the show, we only got to see the aftermath of the Battle of the Burning Mill, a conflict between House Bracken and House Blackwood. While this shot is evoking, we missed out on both the battle and the introduction of Alysanne Blackwood, a character who goes on to be incredibly important in Fire and Blood. In the books, we read that in the midst of the battle, Lord Samwell Blackwood came face to face with Amos Bracken. As the mill burned around them, the pair met in single combat. Amos would come off victorious, slaying Samwell. Upon witnessing her older brother fall in combat, Alysanne Blackwood, known as Black Aly, knocked a weirwood arrow and fired it at her brother's killer. The arrow found the eye slit of Amos's helm and drove deeply into his skull. Although Aly avenged her brother, her vengeance does little to stop the even greater atrocities to be committed throughout the Riverlands, which could have been the perfect theme and lesson to convey to the audience and Aly that personal vengeance is pointless in the grand scheme of things, especially in war. Aly continues to campaign with Team Black throughout the Riverlands. She even shared a tent with Sabitha Frey, another young woman who preferred to wear armor rather than dresses. It was also rumored that the pair even mashed clams. But Sabitha's character has been aged up and her name changed to Serena. We saw her and Forrester Frey treat with Jace in season 2. By the end of the war, the pointlessness of personal vengeance could have been made abundantly clear through Aly's story, compelling her to develop into a merciful woman. No spoilers here, but in the books, Aly's merciful nature goes on to shape the structure of the entire realm at the conclusion of the war. Not introducing Aly during the Battle of the Burning Mill will likely negatively affect her story. We won't have that personal attachment to this heroic woman who avenged her brother, and the experience and development of her point of view will be completely lost. While Blood and Cheese was a highlight of season 2, it failed to linger throughout the rest of the season like it should have, and by episode 4 or 5, it felt largely forgotten. Blood and Cheese was so much more devastating in the books. Blood and Cheese find Helena, Jaehaerys, Jaehaera, and Maelor, who was Helena and Aegon's second son, who was cut from the show. Cheese forces Helena to pick which one of her sons she wants to lose. Maelor or Jaehaerys? Helena names Maelor, possibly believing that the 2-year-old would be too young to understand, or perhaps it was because the older boy, Jaehaerys, was King Aegon's heir. In response to Helena's choice, Cheese tells Maelor, "You hear that, boy? Your mama wants you dead." But instead of killing Maelor, Blood decapitates the elder son Jaehaerys, traumatizing Helena, Jaehaera, and leaving Maelor with the lifelong belief that his mother would have traded his life for his brother. Knowing that she had named him to die, Helena is deeply ashamed of her actions, and this causes her to sink into a deepening madness, an element that is largely missing from the show. The death of Jaehaerys continues to echo throughout the books, largely used as a justification for Team Green to continue fighting against Rhaenyra. Also, after Blood is finally caught, Queen Alicent orders Larys Strong to find out everything about the man, so that she could identify his family and bathe in the blood of his wife and children. Yeah, Alicent and Rhaenyra are portrayed as monsters in the book, but have been greatly toned down and made more sympathetic for the show. Just when you thought I was done with Jace, there is even more the show left out. In the books, Jace is a much more active character. After maturing following his journey to Winterfell, he becomes a driving force during the war. While Rhaenyra is recovering from her miscarriage she experienced at the beginning of the war, Jace steps up and is the one who sends Joffrey and his dragon Tyraxes to the Vale in order to uphold the promise that he made to Lady Jane Arryn of providing a dragon and their rider to defend the Vale. Jace was also the one who reached out to the Prince of Pentos, who agreed to foster Jace's half-brother Aegon and Viserys, a potential rash decision that would come back to bite him later. But now that he wasn't the one to make this decision in the show, his story will be less impactful. Jace was also the one who brought Corlys Velaryon back into the fold. After Rhaenys's death at the Battle of Rook's Rest, Corlys grew resentful towards Rhaenyra and blamed her for his wife's death. He all but abandoned Team Black to sulk on Driftmark, but Jace offered him the position of Hand of the Queen to bring him back on side, and together Jace and Corlys plan the assault upon King's Landing. But at this point, Jace and Corlys conclude that they had too few dragons to take the city, so Jace devises the Dragon Seed plan. He aims to use bastards of House Targaryen who could potentially claim a dragon to add to Team Black's strength. All in all, Jace was the biggest victim of the adaptation of Season 2. In the books, the sowing of the dragon seeds was a bit different. There was also 3 wild dragons that made Dragonstone their home: the Grey Ghost, Sheepstealer, and the Cannibal. In the show, Sheepstealer has been relocated to the Vale of Arryn, where she is met by Rannar, but more on that situation later. Of these wild dragons, Sheepstealer was the only one semi-tolerant of humans, and several attempts were made by the dragon seeds to claim the beast. A man named Silver Daenerys, who claimed to be a descendant of Maegor the Cruel, stepped up to claim Sheepstealer, but Sheepstealer would have none of it and bit Daenerys' arm off. While he screamed in pain, his sons rushed to staunch the wound. However, the smell of blood attracted the attention of the cannibal, and the great beast descended upon them and devoured Daenerys along with his sons. The cannibal was rumored to be older than Vhagar, though not as large. He was massive, coal-black with green eyes. The cannibal would attack younger dragons and feast on their corpses and any dragon eggs he came across. This behavior is what earned him his name. Though the cannibal doesn't really add much to the story, most book fans would have been excited to see the dragon in live action, but unfortunately the show cut him from the Dragon Seed plotline. And that brings us to the wild dragon that we do see in the show, Sheepstealer. In the books, Sheepstealer is claimed by an unremarkable girl named Nettles, who forged the bond with the dragon by observing its preference for sheep. Every day, Nettles would bring a freshly slaughtered sheep to the dragon, and eventually, Sheepstealer bent its neck to Nettles, and the pair were bonded. Nettles goes on to play a massive role in the future of the books, and should do so in the show as well. So book spoiler warning for the next 30 seconds. In the books, Nettles strikes up a relationship with Daemon. While one account states that she was actually the bastard daughter of the rogue prince, another says the pair were unrelated but clapped cheeks, eventually falling in love. Rumors of this relationship between Daemon and a dragon seed finds its way back to Rhaenyra, who becomes enraged, declaring that Nettles had used foul spells to steal Sheepstealer and seduce her husband. She goes so far to demand Nettles' head be brought to her at once. Daemon learns of this and helps Nettles escape Rhaenyra's wrath. The pair have a sad farewell and Nettles flies off to hide in the Vale. Instead of returning to King's Landing, Daemon flies to Harrenhal to meet his destiny. While this story could have led to a compelling arc for Daemon, Rhaenyra and Nettles, we will likely get something completely different. The show seems to have combined Nessos' character with Rannar Targaryen, so the rumors of Daemon sleeping with the dragon seed will be entirely changed. The big man himself has criticized season 2, but what did you want the TV show to include in season 2 but didn't? Comment below.